Okay, it's about the 12th September. What's the year,
2015.
2015. You can tell I'm in my 95th year. And my daughters asked me if I would go over a few things in my life, since they would like to have some sort of a record of who was on first and where we came from and things of that nature. Starting out, my parents were from Ohio. My mother was from Clinton County in Sabina, Ohio. That would be this lady right here in this picture of my index finger. And my father was from Washington Courthouse, which is about 11 miles from Sabina. Anyhow, whatever happened, that's where my mother and father came from. The 3 children, I had a brother and a sister, myself. We were born in Mount Holly, New Jersey, because apparently sometime before our coming around, my father went to New Jersey by various routes through Dayton and some other part of the country. He ended up in Mount Holly, New Jersey, and they got off at this Union newsstand about 5 miles from Fort Dix, New Jersey, and there was a sign there that said help wanted. So he got a job there, and he was with his mother. And they had left Ohio for some reasons that I don't want to go into here. But anyway, he got that job, and 7 Madison Avenue was right down the road. So my father bought that property down there eventually and opened up a 5-table pool room and tobacco store and what have you in Mount Holly, New Jersey, which is about 18 miles out of Philadelphia, about 78 miles from New York City, down in Mafia country here. So this picture here shows myself and my sister and my mother in the front of the pool room a good many years ago. Thank you. Let's see, pool hall. We had a news store. My mom died at the age of 7 years old, and not under the best of conditions, but we don't have to go into much detail about that. But anyhow, after that, I went to live with my grandmother, who lived on the other side of town. That'd be my father's mother. And I stayed with her several years. And then my father had this lady come from Virginia to come up and take care of us children and help run the place. And my grandmother didn't think very much of that idea, so she was not on good terms with my father. So anyway, after a while, I lived with my grandmother for several years, and they brought me back to the pool room, and I grew up there at 7 Madison Avenue in Mount Holly, New Jersey. That's where I grew up. I had an interesting childhood. I remembered certain things about the store and the pool room, and how the people, we had 5 tables, and how the long crowds of people come down each side and sit down, and the guys come out of New York and Philadelphia with their little suitcases and took all them farmers' money. You know, they would chicken them in, they'd bet with them, and they would... Anyhow, we just grew up in a large pool room. My father also eventually had a 126-acre farm. He never farmed, but he farmed it out and let someone else do it. I had a little problem. Of course, my mother died at the age of 7, and when I lived with my grandmother, she didn't want me to call this lady Mom, and I never would, so that made me a marked man, and I got a lot of punishment for not not calling her mom. But that was a way of life back then, so I had delivered newspapers. I delivered newspapers up in the black section of town. I had about 100 and some customers. It was a night route because I got the papers off the railroad station where they come out of Philadelphia. And of course everybody played the numbers, and back in those years the only thing you could look at would be the newspaper to find out the number. It wasn't like today where you could pack, punch, or call something. Okay, I was throwing a lot of dirt on the sidewalk. The trains come in about every 5 minutes out of Philadelphia. So people were now and then you'd see a good soul say, "What's the matter? Did you lose something?" Tell me, "Yeah, we lost our dime or penny," and they would give you the money. It was like a shakedown. But kids, we played baseball together. The black people, the white people, the yellow people over in the Pennsylvania freight yard. We never had no uniforms or nothing, but we all got along good. And I remember sledding, hanging on the bumpers of cars, because there's some hills around where we lived, and you'd wait to see a car go up the hill, and you grab a hold of the rear bumper and ride up the hill with them so you could come back down flying. And I see a note there about blueberries and corduroy knickers. Well, one time I was in school and I went to fill my inkwell and I spilled a whole bunch of ink all the way down the floor, and I was scared I would be punished. So I remember when the teacher turned around, I sat down and slid all the way down with my corduroys to try to wipe up the floor. And I say, letting air out of a cop's car. Yeah, it was on a Halloween, and every kid took a wheel. And it just happens that one of the guys didn't run fast enough, and he got caught, and he blew the whistle on the rest of us. And next morning I was in the pool room up front. My father was out in the back somewhere, and this officer come in and asked if I could see my father, and I said, "Is this about letting air out of tires?" He said, "Yes." Well, I said, "Boy, let me just don't tell him." I said, "What are you going to do to me? Because he'll beat the living devil out of me." And he said, "Well, you're supposed to be up the city building at 1 o'clock this afternoon." And he said, "All you boys will be there." Well, I said, "Well, I'll make sure I'm there, officer." I said, "But don't tell him, because I don't want to get beat up." And we said, "Well, I'll be looking for you." So we all went up there, and when we went up there, they had 3 or 4 dump trucks, and they gave us hand pumps, and we had to let the air out of the truck tires, and we had to pump them up with a hand pump. But that was our punishment, and that went on for about 2.5 hours. Some of my things I remember as a young fella was spending the beach on the night at the beach along the ocean. My father used to drive down there sometime, and we'd sleep right on the beach. You can't do that anymore. I remember the shipwreck at Asbury Park, New Jersey, when a vessel caught on fire. It was coming out of Havana. It was a passenger vessel, and it caught on fire, and I think 126 people burnt to death. They beached it at Asbury Park, New Jersey, and tied it on to Convention Pier. And we drove down there. It was just about 30 miles from where we lived, and they had some bodies laying there in the sand, and the cops come and made us go away. And remember at 16, I was still home there, and I was cleaning out the cow barn. We had a cow. And I heard this big roar, and I ran out of the cow barn. I looked up, and it was a Hindenburg, that big larger than aircraft from Germany, a long Hindenburg. And it had that swastika on the back end of it, and had all those little things hanging down. It was just real low. And about 2 hours from then is when it crashed and burnt at Lakehurst, New Jersey, which was about 20 miles up the road. So I got to see that about 20 minutes for a couple of hours before Hindenburg crashed and burnt. I graduated from high school in 1939. I had a little problem with that because we had organized sports in New Jersey, and you had to wear a certain gym suit. And my father would not say, "You're not getting any damn gym suit." And I said, "Well, you have to have that. Everybody has one." He said, "You're not having it. You're not getting it." So for 2 years, junior and senior, I had to sit in the president's office and see these kids out there running all and having a great time. And I could not go because there was no way I could get a gym suit. And I had some other disagreements with my father, but there wasn't much disagreement. His word was iron and law. And I had a younger sister and a younger brother. My sister was more or less like me, and my brother was sort of like my father, but he was a nice guy. But anyway, I was sort of in these nighttime papers, and one of my customers was an old Navy guy. He'd been there 20 years in the Navy, and he told me a story every night when I took his papers up there, and I was sold on the Navy. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And because of this, I was set my thing to join the Navy.